Okay, hello everyone. Thanks for joining us again this afternoon for our second round of concurrent sessions. I've had the pleasure of working very closely with our next presenter, and I've seen firsthand her passion for supporting residents and their families through educational and accessible innovations. Kathleen Edwards is the Education Manager at Family Councils Ontario and has an extensive background in facilitation. Prior to joining our team, Kathleen worked with AgeWell and as a professor in the Activation Coordination Gerontology program at Durham College. Today, Kathleen will be sharing tools and best practices for fielding family council connections. Like our previous sessions, please feel free to input questions into your chat box on the right-hand side, and we'll be able to discuss them at the end of Kathleen's presentation. All right, Kathleen, the floor is yours. Thanks so much.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. I am so excited to share some tips and tricks for virtual council meetings. So as Tiffany mentioned, I am the Education Manager for Family Councils. I actually joined in January 2020. I was just settling into my role and understanding how family councils work and the work of our organization, and then the pandemic happened. And as stressful and as challenging as that was, it was also a really exciting opportunity for someone like me who is just this big nerd about knowledge and information. It brought about opportunities for collaboration and connection in different ways, as well as just different ways of using technology and having to learn about using technology to have meetings. And I've used so many different platforms and everyone is different. And so if you're feeling overwhelmed with, making the transition from face-to-face meetings to virtual meetings, please don't feel alone. To be honest, when I facilitate things online, I'm more exhausted after leading like a virtual meeting than I was like face-to-face meeting, just because it requires a different set of skills and I feel like you're multitasking a little bit more. I do want to make it clear that I'm not presenting a very detailed description of all the different technologies you can use. I really don't want to overwhelm you if you're someone who's kind of new on this journey of learning to use technology and thinking about making this transition. But I do want to provide some ideas and some tips and tricks of what technologies are available, as well as how you can use that technology to promote engagement during meetings, as well as to facilitate connections between council meetings outside of meetings. So I'm also an instructor, and one of the things I like to do is I like to try and model in my presentations how I would suggest that we go about leading a session or facilitating a session. So one of the things I always like to start with are just the expectations. So here's some discussion directives. So all attendees must be muted. We ask that you also mute on your end. So just make sure that you are muted. And that's just because background noises can be distracting and we really do want to ensure that we can hear everyone. We want it to be a safe space for peer support and discussion. So again, there's so many different ways of understanding and experiences that it's okay to disagree. Please try to allow people to finish their thoughts before you respond. I know it's a tough thing to do in a virtual environment because you can't see that person, their body language is indicating they're getting ready to wrap up, but just please try to be mindful, make use of the features available in technology to try and indicate to me or to Tiffany that you do want to ask a question or engage. So it could be raising your hand or typing a question in the chat box. Be kind and respectful. So again, we really don't know, especially because you're not in the same room. You don't have the chance for the informal interactions and introductions. So we really don't know what has happened before this person is joining the session. So just be kind, be respectful, take some time to check in with people. Just ask them how they're doing, what's going on. So that way you kind of have that information to gauge, is their body language showing me that they're upset at something that I'm saying? Or is it that something else happened that they've just brought that into the meeting and it's kind of impacting how they're responding to the discussion we're having? And then another thing I like to do is I don't just want people to share, here's the issue, and just continue talking about the same issue. I'm someone who really likes saying, here's the issue, but here's how I, see a potential solution. So again, share ideas and solutions. So again, You are experts. So we live in all different areas of the province. You're aware of different resources, organizations, and supports that may have been helpful to you in addressing your concerns. So please feel free to share those with others because, again, sometimes you just don't know something exists. There's so many things going on in our lives that just having someone share something or an idea or a resource is great. So share those ideas and solutions. Don't just, reiterate, this is the problem, this is the problem, this is the problem. So what do I want to accomplish today? So the idea for this session is really to kind of walk you through understanding what is actually happening when it comes to the role of technology in family councils. It has evolved since 2019 and 2020, and I will share some data from our needs assessments that kind of indicates the importance that technology's played in 2020, and I believe moving forward, just in a sense, because we've gotten used to interacting this way, and there are some benefits for councils to using technology. So one thing I do want you to keep in mind is that, yes, face-to-face is great, and that's the ideal. I know a lot of members do appreciate that. However, you may want to consider, a hybrid approach, which means you aren't just doing one or the other, but trying to find a balance of both just to maximize participation, because there are some benefits to using technology as well as some disadvantages. I'm also going to identify what technology is available for family councils to use during your virtual meeting. So what are the different options and why might you want to use some of those? Who? So understand who should take the lead in facilitating these virtual meetings. So what are the specific skills in leading a virtual meeting that might be slightly different from leading a face-to-face meeting or a typical family council meeting? And identify organizations that can help provide additional support for older adults or for participants in your council who want to develop that digital literacy. We all have different levels of comfort with technology. Some people are extremely comfortable with it and learn and pick things up really quickly. However, others don't, and that's okay. You're going to have that in your councils. And so there are organizations that can offer additional support beyond you as a council or you as the person leading the meeting to help others gain a sense of comfort, whether it's through the public library in your community or some of the other organizations I'm going to speak to today. Why? So again, what specifically are the goals of a virtual meeting? And they may be similar or they may be different to your goals when you're having those face-to-face or in-person meetings. And identify the benefits and features that are available to promote interaction within these virtual meetings. So again, each platform is unique, but there are some really cool things that you can do to engage your family council members during a meeting. So it's not just talking, but there's some other really cool things that you can do to interact and kind of, get different people's perspectives, as well as accomplish your formal business for your council. And the last aspect is how. So specifically, we're going to explore how, what are some best practices for facilitating virtual meetings? What are some different tools that you can explore? Again, as you gain comfort with technology, what are some other things you can include as part of your meeting? And you'll see a few today, and some you won't see today just because of how this is set up. It's a little bit trickier to view polls on Zoom when you're running it the way that we are, but I'll show you another alternative for polling. So that being said, here is my first example. So I'm not sure if anyone has ever used Menti before, and you will see me shortly switch to the screen. So what this is, Menti is an online real-time polling software. So basically, I created a survey by going to Mentimeter, and I have questions I'm going to be asking you. I'm going to have this happen 3 times today. So if you have a smartphone, or if you can minimize the screen and go to menti.com, or if you've got a pen, you're going to go to www.menti.com, and then you're going to use the code 651-60677. So again, you're going to visit menti.com. You can use your tablet, your smartphone. You can also minimize Zoom, and on your browser, open up another new window and go to www.menti.com. And then you're going to enter the code 651-60677. And it's going to ask you a question. So I'm just going to minimize this. And I'm going to stop my share. I'm going to stop my share for a second. So I'm going to pause that for a minute. Screen share. All right, I'm bringing up my specific questionnaire. So my question is, I would like to know if your council has had a virtual meeting. So there's two options. It's yes or no. So hopefully you've all gotten to Menti and brought it up. And why is it a different code? So apparently it wants you to use the code 77790241. So I was wrong, and you're now seeing one of the challenges of using technology. So go to www.menti.com and use the code 77790241. My apologies for that slight technical snafu. And the nice thing is, when you have people answering the question, and you can choose what type of poll it shows up as. So I picked a pie chart because I thought it would be kind of a cool virtual image showing up. However, there's other options. So you could do, bubbles. You could do a bar graph. And it kind of shows that real-time change in response. So I can see how many people have responded to the answer. And I'm just going to wait a few more seconds to see if there's anyone else who's going to slowly join or slowly answer. But if not, so that's exciting. Majority of the respondents have had a virtual meeting. So that's great to hear. However, if you haven't, that's okay. I know that technology is not for everyone. And I know that there are, there are some families and some family councils that really do prefer that face-to-face. And because we are getting back to nicer weather in Ontario, especially if you are in an area where your current, lockdown zone or your zone would allow for larger public gatherings, you can also think about that. So if you really do miss that face-to-face, one thing I would say is that if you all live in the same community and you all have a way of communicating, you could potentially resume that face-to-face meeting in an outdoor space that's safe, right? So you don't necessarily need to use technology. However, if you are, that's really exciting to hear. Okay, I'm gonna stop share again and go back to my slides. Screen share. Share screen, share. Awesome. I'm just gonna resume my slides now. Come on. There we go. So there you go. You saw my first little snafu, but that's okay. The more that you engage in virtual sessions, and even when things go wrong, don't panic. That's something, just go with the flow. Just say, technology, it's kind of like a teaching moment. And when something happens once, it won't happen again. So to give you an idea, to support what you were saying, so from Family Council 2019, Family Council 360, so there's a needs assessment that was done in 2019. And one of my first jobs when I joined Family Councils Ontario was to analyze this data. And one of the questions we asked was, do family councils use technology as part of their meetings? And so surprisingly, 81% of family councils did not use technology as part of their meetings, and 19% did. So it's interesting because technology wasn't really important to the work of family councils in 2019. And unfortunately, because of 2020, it suddenly became a little bit more prominent of a role. But of the technology that was used in 2019, email was the most common technology that was available that councils would use. And email was used mostly to communicate and facilitate that ongoing communication between council members. Again, email, there's a little bit of comfort with using email. It's something that's fairly simple and straightforward to use. We use it in our daily lives. We use it in our professional lives and our personal lives. And it's something that it's fairly easy to find someone to help teach you how to learn to use that specific technology. Technology with comfort with technology and skills in using technology, as well as the loss of face-to-face interaction and access to technology were all recognized as barriers to using technology for councils in 2019. So while some councils may have indicated they were interested in using technology, unfortunately, it might have either been the cost of having that technology or the home wasn't able to provide that specific form of technology they requested to allow them to use technology as part of their meetings. And I will say that one of the most prominent forms of technology that seemed to be very user-friendly for councils to use if they wanted to have a virtual meeting was Zoom. So prior to COVID-19, 12% of family councils were considering the use of technology. So there were some who didn't use it, but were starting to think about, well, maybe it might be a good idea to consider as a strategy to improve attendance and include family from diverse communities. Again, just thinking about the experience of caregivers. So my hometown is a good example. I was born in Windsor, and unfortunately, there's not a lot of jobs for people who don't want to work in the trades or work as a nurse and cross the border. Like, there's very limited opportunities for certain professions. So I would say the majority of my colleagues, my friends from high school, we might have gone to post-secondary education in that community, but many of us, to find jobs and for a career that we wanted, we had to leave that community. So, there's an increase in that long distance caregiving and interactions with the family. So I can see why there is that potential interest for using technology. So then what happened with 2020? So in 2020, we did ask about the use of technology, and it was similar. We asked before COVID-19, had councils used technology? And in this survey, 94% of respondents said their councils had not used technology before COVID-19. So again, there's similarities between 2019 and 2020. Was technology something that was even thought to be important to part of the council meeting? No, it was not. It was not even on the radar. And then COVID happened. And, it really triggered that shift because we were unable to meet face to face. You were even unable to go into the physical space where you would meet. So that was really challenging. So there's a need for family councils to adapt so they could continue their work. And you've done some amazing things. So one of the other questions on our survey in 2020 was to ask, have you had a virtual meeting since April 2020? And I'm excited to say that yes, 72% of respondents who took the survey had, and 28% said no. So again, that 28%, it could just be preference for that council, or that 28% could also just be their council has not met at all. Maybe there might be some occasional emails to convey key information, but as a council, since COVID-19 happened, they haven't resumed their work together and they haven't met. So I'm hoping that if you are one of those councils, you'll see this presentation as a first step in potentially resuming meetings. So what types of technology can councils use? So there's different forms of technology that you can explore and examine. So the one that you're probably most familiar is software. So apps or programs that are part of your computer or your smartphone. And when deciding to adopt the use of technology, you really do want to explore the different options that are available to you and recognize that we all have varying levels of comfort and knowledge, as well as limited time to research and learn new things. So in addition to being that essential family caregiver, being part of your family council, you may also have other roles. You may be working, you may be providing care for someone else in the community as well. You may have additional responsibilities that you have, or just want to do some things for yourself in the community and get a break from the essential caregiving role that you are taking on. So you do want to think about, what is most practical for our group and really have that discussion when you are trying to decide what types of technology to use. So the most common software is email. So things like Outlook, Gmail, Yahoo, they're programs that are free and they promote communication and sharing of information. And again, in this case, you can share information in the form of just a message, just checking in with people. It could be sending a card. It could be sending images. It could be sending a calendar. It could be sharing links and websites. So it's very easy through email to share information. And to, if someone has a question, potentially ask that question, and then everyone who's on that, email can share a response if they know, or share resources. So email is something that is fairly easy, straightforward to use and not quite as intimidating. And it is very often the primary mode of communication for councils. So primarily, their mode of communication, especially when they were not in meetings, would be through email. So email is something that councils were already using. So it is something that you can continue to use, and just be creative about how you use it. So maybe it is you create a mail list and you have, here's some resources, or, you share opportunities in your community to learn about a specific topic, or just share updates or share images, whatever it is. But it's up to you to be creative about the use of that email as a form of interaction between council members. The second category is voice over IP, or VoIP. So voice over internet protocol refers to a group of technologies for the delivery of voice communication and multimedia over the internet. So Zoom is a really good example of a VoIP. Skype, GoToMeeting, Cisco WebEx, and Microsoft Teams are also examples of voice over IP technology. So again, these are things where you download something or you join through an internet browser, and it allows both video and audio, but it does have a number of other beneficial features. But if you are someone who misses the face-to-face interaction, voice over IP is kind of nice because it does allow you to have, if they have a web camera, to see their face. Therefore, you're able to get some sense of that face-to-face interaction. It's virtual face-to-face. However, at least you can still see people and you can still check in with them. And the nice thing about things like Zoom, Skype, WebEx, and Microsoft Teams is you don't just have to use it for like a meeting and formal business. Like you could just have a social. You could just be creative about how you're using it, right? So that's another option for category. And then the third is hardware. So hardware is another form of technology that councils were potentially using before COVID-19, as well as after COVID-19, and this might have been supported through the use of their home and the use of something like teleconference systems that would allow large groups of people to join by calling in. So it would look like that triangle thing that's like a speakerphone. So it's a line that accommodates multiple people coming in and calling. It's also a speakerphone, so it allows the person who'd be in the room, so the staff who are answering questions would be in a room with a speakerphone answering questions, but it allows multiple people to call in, and it does promote that opportunity for people to ask questions. There's also a video camera option. So in some cases, when you want to use the teleconferencing with a video conference, in that room, you might combine both the bar that's got the camera and the speaker, as well as the thing with the triangle. Or sometimes it might just be a speakerphone if it's a smaller group of people. So those are all different examples of technology. And then what you use now might evolve, especially as you resume in-person meetings. So it's important to consider, how are you going to continue using technology, and examining the benefits of using that technology for your council meetings now, but also as you're starting to think about the transition to, I'd say, not life back to normal, but when you're going to resume those face-to-face meetings with your council, you do want to consider, how are you going to be using technology and what role is it going to play? And then using knowledge of limited comfort and skill, along with different organizations, can help address some of those things that might be a barrier to using a certain form of technology. There are some resources through Family Councils Ontario that can, again, help you feel a little bit more comfortable. So something else that was interesting. So in the 2020 survey, we wanted to ask how family councils were meeting. So specifically, what tools were you using? So the majority of councils do use Zoom for their meetings, followed by WebEx. And in part, it might be because Zoom does have that free version. So you can get an account and use it for free for 40 minutes. I know that some councils get frustrated by the limits of the 40 minutes. However, here's a nice trick, and I think this is important when you're going to be having a meeting that's about 2 hours long. You do want to have a break. You wouldn't just sit, in a meeting for 2 hours and not get up and go to the bathroom or go and have a coffee and take some time to socialize. So the same thing happens when you have, the free version of Zoom. When you have that 40-minute limit, set the meeting for 40 minutes. And then at that 40-minute mark, when you leave, take a break and then resume again afterwards. So it's kind of that natural break within your meetings. And there's no limit that like Zoom with the free version doesn't say that you can't have 2 consecutive meetings in the same day. And it doesn't have a set time limit between those meetings. So you could schedule one, give yourself a 10-minute break, and then resume the next one. So that's something to consider. Other popular platforms were Cisco WebEx, and I'm going to assume this may be for homes where maybe the use of technology was supported by the actual home itself. So the administration might lend their account. Cisco WebEx is fairly secure for a system. I know I was doing a webinar in the summer with the City of Toronto Public Health, and they had to host it through Cisco WebEx and couldn't do through Zoom because the firewall on their computers wouldn't allow another platform to be used. Zoom is also something that's fairly user-friendly, and Skype is something that family councils found to be fairly complicated. So it was used, but it's really complicated compared to Zoom or compared to things like Google Meets, Google Hangouts, or WebEx. When it comes to meetings, 23% of councils have had at least 3 meetings since April 2020, and those were virtual meetings. 21% have met at least 8 times, and 20% have met at least twice. So there are, again, a significant number of councils who have made that jump. And if you are considering making that jump, I encourage you to look at the networks that you might have and reach out to other councils in your area, or reach out to other councils or other networks and ask them about how they made that jump and what has worked, what hasn't worked. And also reach out to your staff assistants or your homes to see if they can support you in making that jump. The majority of councils have had 6 to 10 participants attend their virtual meetings. And then about 30% of those councils have had 11 to 15. So they've been fairly well attended. I know it's tough just with what we're going through right now, but I would say that they have been quite well attended. So now I'm going to switch again, because my next question is going to be thinking about what are the characteristics of effective leaders. So I'm going to stop my share and screen share, sharing that. Okay, I'm gonna go to my next question. Why is it not? Okay, so the same code for Mentimeter, but now I'd like to know, what are the characteristics of an effective facilitator? So when you're thinking about the person who's leading your meeting, what are the characteristics of that effective facilitator? So this one's a little different. It's not just, oh, awesome, listening skills. Respect. Staying on course. Absolutely. Understanding diverse, yes, absolutely. Understanding diverse perspectives. Good listener, respect, mindful of time, ensure everyone has a chance to contribute, or at least feels engaged. Calm, can navigate through the high emotions. Absolutely, they're going to be coming at you. Keep the agenda flowing, timely, be a mediator. Conflict resolution. Organized, allow people to speak, but also limit how much they speak. That's definitely an art to learn. But the nice thing is with technology, you have a little bit more control, because if you're the person who's hosting, you have a button called mute all. So as much as you think it's insulting someone, if you've given them ample warning and you are the virtual facilitator, muting them sometimes can be a good thing. You may want to warn them through like a private message that you're going to mute them, and remind them of the specific rules that they are not following when you discuss the codes of conduct or the expectations for that meeting. But absolutely, absolutely well done. Stop share, switch back. I'm going to switch back to my presentation now. So what is facilitation? So when it comes to council meetings, facilitators can inspire participation, inform the structure, set the expectations, and influence participation and engagement during council meetings. Facilitators help the creation of the meeting environment. So they basically help to set the tone of the setting for that meeting. Beyond the physical or virtual space, it's also involved in developing practices for effective meetings, recognizing that family members are busy with limited time for council work. You really want to make sure that they feel like the time they're investing in your meeting is meaningful and valuable, and that it's not a waste of their time. You want to create a welcoming environment by sharing information With those who attend meetings, you do want to make sure that they are aware of what the agenda is going to be. You do want to include a slide as part of the introduction about the expectations for that meeting. You may also have the agenda on a slide so you can let people know what's going to be happening, as well as email them a copy of that agenda so they can also read along either virtually, or some people like to print them out and check things off as you get done. Facilitators should also be familiar with the terms of reference and expectations for the council. So the nice thing is, as councils, when you're making that shift to a virtual meeting, you aren't starting from scratch. You did, as a council, have terms of reference or a code of conduct. So look to those and then see how you can adapt that or use that as a starting point during your first virtual meeting to start the conversation. So some important skills to facilitating a meeting are things like, as you mentioned, listening, understanding, respect, neutrality, and assertiveness. So listening. So you want to make sure that all participants feel comfortable sharing their thoughts and ideas. You want them to feel engaged, but you also yourself as a facilitator need to engage in active listening. You want to pay attention to what they're saying as well as their tone of voice. I know this can be challenging in an online environment with potential technical issues, like the audio could cut in and cut out, or have issues with microphones or background noise, but make sure that you set those ground rules and ask those who are not speaking to mute themselves. So if you're having trouble hearing what's going on and listening to what people are saying, make sure you say for the person facilitating, I'm having trouble hearing you. Or if the mic cut out, you can maybe paraphrase what they said and say, am I understanding you correctly? So just follow up. Just try to let them know that you're trying your best to understand and hear what they're saying, that you are listening, but something just happened and you want to ask to clarify what they were saying. If you're unable to address technical issues, make use of things like the chat box to check your understanding. So again, if the sound is just not working, or if their video or their connection is not working, try to use the chat box as well and type a message to them just to ensure that you are understanding what it was they were trying to share. Again, understanding. This is where you draw on your knowledge of the long-term care home, current areas of concern within the home and the sector, as well as your overall goals for the council. And how do the current topics of the agenda help your council work towards your goals? And uses information to help you structure the meeting and set and reinforce the expectations for your behavior or behaviors. Respect. So this is key to make sure that all council members feel comfortable sharing their thoughts and concerns with people in the group. You again want to make sure that you use your council's code of conduct or create meeting rules and set meeting rules. And again, remind people of those rules and discuss them at the start of each meeting. If you are part of the executive for your council, again, you don't want to create them in advance without consulting the council. You want to engage in that co-creation. So you want to bring some ideas, say, this is what we had in our terms of reference. Does this meet our current needs? If not, then ask for some input. And again, you'll get a lot more buy-in by doing that. Neutrality. So it's really tough. This is an art, but again, you want to make sure that you hear all participants on an issue. You want to avoid taking a specific side or favoring one side by allowing one side of the issue more time to speak up. When you do want to share your own thoughts, make sure that you're making it clear that you're expressing your own opinion and that this is not like what you think is going to happen. Just say, so if I can for a minute, I just want to share, I haven't had a chance to share my thoughts as a family member, because it is a challenging thing when you're facilitating a meeting, but you're also a family member. You do want to make sure that people are aware of the difference between your facilitator hat and your hat as a family member. So just let them know, I haven't had a chance to share my thoughts or my views on this, so I'm going to share that. And then go back to your facilitator role after you've had the chance to share that little piece of information. And then again, this reminder to go back to that code of conduct for meeting rules and assertiveness. So to make sure that your meeting remains efficient and that other participants follow the rules, you need to be confident with your decisions. Don't be afraid or hesitate to speak up and intervene. So if you think something is happening, if someone is going off topic, speak up. If someone is, not muting their microphones and you've reminded them a bunch of times, like just speak up, let them know what's going on. So people won't be aware there's an issue unless you let them know that there's an issue. So facilitation is intended to help promote teamwork and participation. So again, you can tell people how they can share their thoughts. If they don't want to speak up, use the chat box. You can create polls to get people to share their thoughts and opinions, but allow them to answer anonymously. Encourage open discussion and debate. So again, just say, here's our concern. We want to hear all sides, all thoughts, and ensure that the group works towards your goals. So again, have that agenda, but keep in mind what it is that you're trying to accomplish in that meeting. So if your conversation starts getting sidetracked, recognize that it's starting to go off track. Maybe have a parking lot or something where you write down that thought and say, we'll get back to talking about this if we have time at the end of the session. Or if it's something where people just want to socialize, maybe that's a signal to you that as part of your meetings, you now need to have a formal part of your agenda, but also that informal part of your agenda where people can just get together and chat and share a coffee or tea and laugh and jokes and, talk about other things besides council business. Because when you'd see each other face to face, you'd get to do that. This is also a good opportunity in your meetings if you want to try and invite staff to join in as well, because you haven't been able to go into homes as often as you'd like, especially if you are not the essential family caregiver at this point in time, depending where you are unable to visit. So it's nice to kind of use technology to promote those opportunities for interacting with each other and, just catching up, and making it a little bit more social and lighthearted, not all about, the more formal agenda. So you're not alone in making this transition. There are resources available through Family Councils Ontario. If you visit our website, under resources, and I want to say COVID-19 resources, there's a bunch of handouts and things tied to technology created by Samantha Peck, but as well as created by Tech Coaches Canada. So one, there's a digital success handbook. So if you're someone who is starting with very little digital literacy, or if you're someone who just wants a little bit more confidence in understanding how to use technologies, this is a good, more detailed handbook that will talk you through some of the specific questions you may have. They've also created quick fact sheets or infographics that will tell you how to and walk you through the steps to creating a Zoom account or setting up Skype or setting up Outlook. So these are all things that you can do. The nice thing about these is that they can easily be downloaded and printed from the Family Councils Ontario website, and they're also available in English and in French. There's also videos. If you're someone who likes to see and hear things, there's also videos where they'll walk you through some of these. So make sure that you check out that section of the Family Councils Ontario website. So now we're getting into some best practices. So my first tip is to plan ahead. It's natural to feel nervous when you're asked to lead a meeting. Most people do, because you're kind of like in the spotlight. So planning ahead is really a key strategy to managing your nerves. If you're someone who really likes to have like a step-by-step of how do I make sure that I get everything done that I need done, if you're someone who enjoys baking, or if you're someone who enjoys making things and you have to do things in a certain way, then I've created a resource that's a virtual council meeting checklist that'll kind of walk you through the steps of things that you might need to think about when you're going to be planning a virtual meeting. So again, you can use this checklist to help walk you through step by step what you should do. So it's things like set a date for your meeting, notify council members. How are you going to notify them? What are you going to do for your agenda and for your meeting? Have you asked for input? Have you created the agenda? Have you asked people to sign up for the meeting? Have you created an FAQ sheet? Or can you share a resource with people so they can feel more comfortable joining you for the session in the specific medium that you've opted to do? You basically want to let people know who they need to contact if they're also having issues connecting. So a good tip is that if you are leading a meeting, please do not make this be you. One of the nice things about our council today is that, or our conference today, is that we have a team. So while I'm presenting today, I don't have to worry about the tech because Tiffany is there to support me with the tech issues. So it's really helpful to kind of draw on that team, and that's part of planning ahead. Which leads into Tip number 2, which is to delegate roles. So again, as I said, it takes a lot of energy to facilitate a virtual meeting, and you're going to be multitasking. So you're going to be looking at your slides, you're going to be watching the time, you're going to be looking at your agenda, but you're also going to be watching the chat and listening to what people are saying. It takes a lot of energy. So you really don't want to do it alone. And that's the nice thing about family councils is that you do have people who are there to support you, and you can recruit them to be part of your team and part of your support. So to save yourself a lot of stress, recruit a team to help support you and assign them specific roles. So if you are working with a leadership model that's more a shared model, where it's not necessarily a formal executive, but there's someone who might help to take note, someone who might, manage time, someone who might, look at signing in, signing out, and the social aspects of your council during meetings, then those might be people who you can naturally look to help support you when you're going to be facilitating a meeting. So a note taker. So who's going to take minutes? If you're facilitating, I highly recommend you're not the person taking minutes because that is just too much multitasking. Someone who can serve to be that tech support, and someone who can be that timekeeper to help remind you that you're, falling behind and you're taking too long to discuss something and you need to move on. Again, when you do recruit this team, you do want to delegate tasks, and you do want to discuss what tasks every person is going to be doing in that role. So you're going to want to meet with this team in advance, and then you're going to want to decide who's going to be doing what in the meeting, so you feel a little bit more coordinated. Tip number 3 is to use visual prompts. So I'm one of many parents in Ontario who had the pleasure of doing the virtual learning after Christmas. My daughter is 4 years old. She's in JK. And this I thought was going to be something very interesting. However, her teacher was amazing. She demonstrated something that helped the students learn the expectations for participation and how to use this technology. So what she did was she created a hard sign, or she wrote on a whiteboard the specific symbol for microphone off, microphone on, and would hold it up so they would try and find something, or the raised hand. So she actually made physical signs to hold up on the screen. And besides her verbal prompt to tell them of what to do, she also held up the symbol to help guide them. And as over the 3 weeks when she was doing online learning, it faded. So it got to the point where she knew what things were, and she just needed to be reminded by the teacher to mute herself. So if it works with kindergarten students, I'm sure it can work with anyone. So it's definitely a strategy I recommend, is use symbols. So create signs, and again, just build it into your initial meeting. So talk people through, here's the mute. And then when you're trying to help someone find it, say it looks like this. And then over time, as people get more confident, you can fade the use of the sign and you're just talking them through something. Again, unfortunately, I didn't have as much time as I wanted to this week. So it's on my to-do list to also create some handouts about how to use some of the potential verbal or visual prompts to help you. So again, just looking at, having a prompt to say, turn your microphone off, turn your camera on, and understanding the shortcuts and how to do that. Tip number 4 is to explain the interface. So again, just you want people to feel comfortable with what's going on. So maybe even before your first formal meeting as a council, you might just want to have a quick tutorial. So just have people come on so they can kind of learn where things are. And in that session, make it clear that you were just there to explain where they can find things and how things work. So this is like an intro session. Come have a try, come learn how to do and how to use before we actually have our first meeting, so people will feel a little bit more comfortable in that first meeting. So trying to do something in advance to try and alleviate any nerves or stress that you will have and that other people attending and who are unfamiliar with that technology would have. You can also create something like this, which is a screenshot, or you can create a handout, again, that you would share and distribute with potential participants in advance of the meeting so they could have it printed out and something as a visual reminder. So they're not relying on you, that they have something in front of them to help guide them with what they're doing. Tip number 5 is to set expectations for participants. Nothing would happen in a meeting if there weren't a number of rules or expectations. However, you want to be careful, because if your rules are too formal, you may alienate some people, and you may not like the term rules. You might want to switch the use of term rules to meeting norms. Everyone who attends the meeting should know and understand the expectations for their conduct during meetings. And again, having the conversations about what is and isn't acceptable and what is and isn't expected really does help to set the tone and keep everyone engaged. Again, you may want to look at what your rules and what the expectations were for when you had in-person meetings and see how they would translate into the virtual environment. So do they still work, or do you need to add to your existing expectations? You also don't want to make too many, or it will get too overwhelming. And you do want to keep everyone on track. However, you also don't want to make it to the point where people are so worried about doing the wrong thing or saying the wrong thing that they just don't want to speak up and they don't want to get engaged. So you do have to find that balance. Ideally, you don't want to have more than 6 rules for your council or for your meeting. So you want to set aside time in your first meeting for that open discussion of the rules. You want to make use of your existing terms of reference. Don't make too many rules, and you can share them along with the agenda. I'm just seeing chat. Okay. Oh, just give me the 5-minute warning. Okay. Make it interactive. So as you saw, online is something that can be very interactive and a lot of fun. So there are technologies where you can create polls, you can create quizzes, you can use the chat box. You can use something called Kahoot, which is similar to Mentimeter, but it's more of a game, and it's really good for trivia or, you know, just trying to make things a little bit more competitive compared to Menti. You can also set up polls for voting. So again, this is a nice way if you do want to engage in more formal business or elections for your council, or get, you know, what are the top priorities and vote on your priorities. This is a good way to capture that, but it's anonymous. And again, if you want to promote opportunities for socialization, something a little bit more informal, or if you have subcommittees, or if you just want to do small brainstorms, then you can use something called breakout rooms, which exist in many platforms. So Zoom has them. They're quite easy to do. Again, that's been a resource that's been requested. So I do plan on creating a resource that would be step-by-step. How would you set up breakout rooms for Zoom? And tip number 7 is to learn from your mistakes. So just be kind to yourself. Remember, things don't always go as planned. So take time to reflect after a meeting and what went well and what didn't go as planned. And then make a note of that, so the next time you do have a virtual meeting, it doesn't happen again. Or if it does happen, maybe you don't feel as nervous or as anxious or respond the way that you did. And then ask council members for feedback. So again, just ask them, how did you feel about, you know, this particular meeting and, you know, using this or using that. And this is just a table with different options for how you could engage using technology. These are 2 organizations I highly recommend that you look to try and help support you. They offer their services for free. TechServe and Connected Canadians, this is how you contact them. They specialize in supporting people in gaining digital literacy skills. So if you do want more support in learning how to use Zoom or learning how to use a specific type of technology or even a smartphone or a tablet, I highly recommend these 2 organizations. And then that's it from me. So I am open to hearing questions.
Kathleen, I loved all of those tips, especially being kind to yourself. I know our small but mighty team will definitely debrief today on some of the tech issues we had earlier, but it is a work in process. We're always learning for new technology. So thanks for these great tips. We did have a question that came in through our feed loop chat. Can the local family council have their own website? They've been sending out a lot of emails. Is it possible to just, you know, throw together a small website so that they can put updates there instead?
I don't see why not. I know that there are some councils that have requested with the home to have a section of their home's site as dedicated to their council. So, I mean, if there's always a cost to a website. However, if that's something your council wants to do, I know that the council networks do have their own website. So, if that's something you want to do, I have spoken to a few people who are interested in doing that. And I think technology is a good way to do that. If you don't want to go the route of creating a website, you could always try doing something like a Facebook group. Or setting up a Twitter account. It really depends on the technology that people are most comfortable using. So I'd say your council best. So do and have a discussion about how would members feel about this. And then, use their input to help guide what you're doing, because you don't want to go through the work of creating something, and websites are a lot of work, and then it's something that they won't use.
That is some great feedback. I agree with Kathleen. It sounds like a great idea, but as long as it's not too much work, especially for your council to take on. A lot of councils also use newsletters as well to kind of compile all of their updates. So there's a lot of things that are accessible, and we will make sure that Kathleen can share some of her information on facilitation and then also connecting. And we also, I will get to this question before we wrap up. Can you offer any suggestions for how family councils suggest to their home more avenues for facilitating meetings during the pandemic?
It's tough because I know that resources, especially if you're in a home that has an active outbreak, it is challenging because they're probably still recovering from everything that's going on. So, anything outside of, the daily things that need to be done is really not on their radar. So, I would say maybe, if you do have a good relationship with your home and the person at the home, like if you had a staff assistant, maybe send them an email and connect with them and just say, hey, we're interested in doing this. Wondered if we could catch up with you, and also maybe trying to do things, but do it like not so formal, but more informal. So I was talking to a council a few weeks ago, and they said it's tough when you're communicating through email because things can get miscommunicated, and that they miss the in-person interactions that they used to get to have, because you'd have casual interactions, passing people in the hall or checking in with them, but because you can't go in, or because if you are in, you're so focused on the essential caregiving role or getting interacting with your loved one or your person, that it's very challenging to have that, or everyone's in PPE, so you may not even recognize who they are. So, maybe talking to them about like, we'd love to have like just an informal Zoom social, or where we could, just check in and hang out and, celebrate, like, let's do like virtual Easter egg decorating or whatever you want to do to try and create that opportunity, just have the casual interactions. I think that's something that is beneficial, because I do think that there needs to be some relationship building moving forward, and just resuming and restoring those informal interactions through technology is a good thing to consider. But also just go to your contacts. So whoever you're talking to, if you have a good working relationship with them, just say, we're very interested in doing this. And just, as a council, if you are talking as a council and you want to approach the home, have the conversation as the council first before you go to the home. And if your council, unfortunately, isn't able to communicate other than through email, then use something like a Survey Monkey or a Doodle Poll or something, just to get input on, like, do you want to, ask the home to borrow their Zoom account or their teleconference line, to have a chance to talk about how are we going to make this work, right? So have the I think the more information you have about the council and what you want to do when you're having that conversation, then the more you're going to get from it. Because again, you're not just going with, oh, here we want technology, we want to start meeting, we want you to help us, but then you can provide them with specific requests. So if we'd like to have a meeting to do this, this is what we'd like, could you support us? And then at least they can give an answer. But again, if you want to do Zoom is free. So there are some free options, but again, I do apologize. I tend to get really excited and talk a lot. So if I didn't get a chance to answer your questions, or you do want to know more about some of the things I talked about, feel free to email me. I have so much more information on all of these. And like I said, there are some resources I do plan on creating to help support you with the transition to virtual. And as I said, don't think that once we're back to meeting in person or face to face, that the use of technology isn't going to be something that isn't important to councils. I do think that, you know, in the long run, it's going to be important for councils to think about, you know, a hybrid approach to technology. So some people may prefer it, or there's some benefits to it. So, you know, just how can you make it work and support your goals and your mandate as a council? But thank you so much. I've had so much fun getting to chat with all of you today, and I'm so excited for this conference today. So thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Kathleen. I really appreciate it. And I hope everyone will think about having some virtual coffee in the days to come after hearing all these best practices. So please make sure that you stay tuned for the closing keynote that is happening actually in a couple minutes by Laura Tamblin-Watt. So please stay tuned, and thanks for joining us. Thanks, Kathleen.
Thank you, everybody.
Take care.
Bye.